60,000 times faster. That is how quickly your brain processes visual information compared to text. 60,000 times. Yet right now, you are probably making your most important decisions using bullet points, scattered notes, and linear lists. And you wonder why clarity feels impossible. Here is what nobody tells you. The problem is not that you lack intelligence. The problem is not that you need more information. The problem is that you are forcing your brain to work against its own architecture. You are trying to solve 21st century complexity with tools designed for grocery shopping. In the next 12 minutes, you will understand exactly why your mind feels overwhelmed. You will learn what neuroscience has discovered about how elite performers actually process complexity. And you will begin to see why everything you have been taught about organizing your thoughts has been working against you. This is not motivation. This is mechanism. And once you understand the mechanism, everything changes. Let us start with an uncomfortable truth. Your brain is not designed for the world you live in. The human brain evolved over millions of years to handle a very specific type of environment. Immediate threats, simple choices, clear cause and effect. See the tiger, run from the tiger. Find food, eat food. The cognitive architecture that kept your ancestors alive is the same architecture you are using to navigate quarterly projections, career pivots, product roadmaps, and investment decisions. Here is the mismatch. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that the average professional today consumes approximately 174 newspapers worth of information every single day. 174 newspapers. Your great-grandparents encountered that much information in an entire year. Your brain did not evolve for this. And here's where it gets worse. According to research from Microsoft's Human Factors Lab, the average attention span has dropped to 8 seconds. 8 seconds. A goldfish maintains focus for 9. But this is not because you are weak or undisciplined. This is because your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is scanning for threats. It is looking for patterns. It is trying to make sense of overwhelming input. The problem is not your brain. The problem is that you have never been taught how to work with your brain instead of against it. Let me show you what I mean. Right now, think about the most complex decision you are facing. Maybe it is a career transition. Maybe it is a product strategy. Maybe it is figuring out how to scale your business while managing a team that is already stretched thin. Whatever it is, hold that complexity in your mind for a moment. Now notice what happens. Your brain starts racing. Thoughts collide. You feel pressure building behind your eyes. You might even feel a slight tightness in your chest. This is not weakness. This is your working memory hitting its limit. Princeton neuroscientist Dr. George Miller identified this limit decades ago. Your working memory can hold approximately 7 items at once. 7, plus or minus 2. That is it. That is the entire bandwidth your conscious mind has available for active processing. But the decision you are facing probably has 20, 30, maybe 50 variables. Dependencies, stakeholders, timelines, risks, opportunities, trade-offs. You are trying to juggle 50 balls with hands that can only hold 7. This is why you feel overwhelmed. This is why clarity feels so rare. And this is why most people default to one of two responses. They either oversimplify, ignoring critical variables until the decision blows up later, or they freeze, stuck in analysis paralysis because their brain literally cannot process everything at once. But here is what elite performers do differently. They do not try to hold more. They do not push harder. They externalize. A landmark study from Stanford's Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences tracked high-performing executives, entrepreneurs, and strategists over a 5-year period. The researchers wanted to understand what separated the top performers from everyone else. They looked at IQ. They looked at education. They looked at experience. None of these factors predicted performance as strongly as one specific behavior. The highest performers consistently externalize their thinking onto visual surfaces before making decisions. Let that sink in. The difference between clarity and confusion is not intelligence. It is whether you keep complexity trapped inside your skull or spread it out where your brain can actually see it. Average thinkers try to solve problems in their heads. They sit at their desk, staring at the ceiling, waiting for insight to strike. They believe that thinking harder will eventually produce clarity. It rarely does. Elite thinkers do something different. They get their thoughts out of their head and onto a surface. They draw connections. They see patterns. They let their visual cortex, the most powerful processing center in their brain, do what it was designed to do. Here is the neuroscience behind this. Your visual cortex occupies roughly 30% of your entire brain. 30%. By comparison, touch occupies 8%. Hearing occupies 3%. Your brain invested massively in visual processing because, for millions of years, survival depended on seeing patterns in the environment. When you externalize your thinking visually, you activate this ancient, powerful processing center. Suddenly, you are not limited to 7 items in working memory. You can see dozens of elements simultaneously. You can spot connections that were invisible when everything was trapped inside your head. You can move pieces around, test relationships, and discover solutions that pure linear thinking would never reveal. This is not a productivity hack. This is how your brain was designed to operate. But there is a problem. Everything you learned in school trained you to think linearly. Take notes from top to bottom. Write outlines with Roman numerals. Create bullet points in sequential order. This approach works fine for simple information capture. It fails catastrophically for complex problem solving. Linear formats force your brain to process information one piece at a time. But complex decisions are not linear. They are webs of interconnected variables. Cause and effect loop back on each other. Changing one element affects 5 others. You cannot understand the system by looking at individual pieces in sequence. This is why you can take detailed notes on a complex problem and still feel confused afterward. You captured the information, but you captured it in a format your brain cannot use for pattern recognition. Think about it this way. Imagine you are trying to understand a city by reading a list of street names in alphabetical order. First, you read Elm Street, then First Avenue, then Main Street, then Oak Boulevard. You could memorize the entire list. But would you understand how to get from one place to another? Would you see which neighborhoods connect? Would you know where the shortcuts are? Of course not. You need a map. A map lets you see the whole system at once. It shows relationships. It reveals patterns. It makes navigation intuitive instead of impossible. This is exactly what your brain needs when facing complexity. Not more lists. Not more bullet points. A visual map of the territory. And here is the insight that changes everything. Mind maps are not a note-taking technique. They are a thinking system. They are a way of externalizing complexity in a format your brain is specifically designed to process. When you create a mind map, you are not just organizing information. You are giving your visual cortex the raw material it needs to find patterns, make connections, and generate clarity. Most people have this completely backwards. They see mind maps as a study tool, something students use to memorize facts, a cute alternative to bullet points. They miss the deeper truth entirely. The world's most effective strategic thinkers use visual mapping not to remember information, but to see information, to understand how pieces connect, to find leverage points that linear analysis would never reveal. But wait, if visual thinking is so powerful, why is not everyone doing it? Simple. Because visual thinking requires a system. Random doodling does not work. Disorganized diagrams do not work. Effectiveness requires methodology. You need to know what to capture, how to structure it, and how to extract strategic insight from what you see. This is exactly what you will learn in this audiobook. Over the next 9 chapters, you will discover a complete system for visual strategic thinking. You will learn frameworks used by elite performers to cut through complexity and make decisions with confidence. You will understand the neuroscience behind why this works and how to apply it immediately. By the end, you will not just understand mind maps. You will think differently, faster, clearer, with a systematic approach you can apply to any complex challenge. But first, you need to understand something crucial. The next chapter reveals a hidden trap that sabotages most people before they even start. It is called linear thinking, and it is costing you far more than you realize. The cost of linear thinking extends beyond confusion. It affects the quality of every decision you make, every strategy you build, and every opportunity you fail to see. And once you understand exactly how this trap works, you will never fall into it again. Chapter 2. The Hidden Cost of Linear Thinking. 11 million bits per second. That is how much information your brain receives every moment. 11 million. But here is the number that should stop you cold. Your conscious mind can only process 40 to 50 bits per second. 40 out of 11 million. That means 99.996% of incoming information never reaches your awareness. Your brain is constantly filtering, constantly deciding what matters and what gets discarded. And the format you use to think determines what survives that filter. Linear thinking is killing your best ideas before you ever see them. In the next several minutes, you will discover exactly how this happens. You will understand why the note-taking methods you learned in school are actively working against your success. And you will see the staggering cost that most professionals never calculate. This is not about preference. This is about cognitive architecture. And once you understand what linear formats do to your brain, you will never look at a bullet point the same way again. Let us start with how you were trained. From the first day of school, you learned to organize information in lines. Top to bottom, left to right. First point, second point, third point. Teachers rewarded neat outlines. Professors praised sequential arguments. Employers expected bullet-pointed reports. This training was not random. It was efficient for a specific purpose, transmitting information from one person to another in a format that could be easily read and graded. But here is what nobody mentioned. The format that works for transmission is catastrophically bad for thinking. A study from Cambridge University's Department of Psychology examined how information format affects insight generation. Researchers gave participants identical complex problems. One group used traditional linear notes. The other group used spatial, nonlinear formats. The results were not even close. The spatial thinking group generated 47% more viable solutions. 47%. Same problem, same information, same time limit. The only difference was how participants organized their thinking. But that is not the most striking finding. When researchers interviewed participants afterward, the linear group reported feeling confident they had explored the problem thoroughly. They believed they had considered all angles. They had not. Their format had created blind spots they could not see. This is the hidden danger of linear thinking. It feels complete when it is not. Let me show you why this happens. When you write information in a list, your brain processes each item as a separate unit. First item, process, store, move to second item, process, store, move to third item. This sequential approach works fine when items are truly independent. Grocery lists, simple task lists, packing checklists. But complex decisions are not made of independent items. They are made of interconnected variables. And linear formats systematically hide those connections. Imagine you are planning a product launch. You create a to-do list. Finalize pricing. Brief the marketing team. Confirm manufacturing timeline. Train the sales team. Prepare customer support documentation. Each item sits on its own line. Separate, sequential, organized. Now here is the problem. Pricing affects marketing messaging. Marketing messaging affects sales training. Sales training depends on customer support readiness. Customer support readiness depends on manufacturing timeline. Manufacturing timeline affects pricing feasibility. Everything connects to everything. But your list shows none of this. Each item sits in isolation, hiding the web of dependencies that will determine success or failure. This is not a minor inconvenience. This is a structural flaw that leads to predictable disasters. Stop for a moment and consider your own experience. How many times have you completed every item on a project list only to have the project fail anyway? How many times have you checked every box but missed something critical that was never on the list? How many times have you looked back at a failed initiative and realized the problem was not execution but understanding? The list was complete. The thinking was incomplete. Average professionals blame execution when projects fail. Elite performers question whether they understood the system in the first place. Here is a pattern I have observed across hundreds of organizations. When a project fails, the postmortem almost always focuses on what went wrong during execution. Someone missed a deadline. Someone did not communicate. Someone made an error. But trace most failures back far enough, and you find the same root cause. The planning format hid critical connections. People thought linearly about a nonlinear system. They optimized individual pieces without seeing how those pieces affected each other. McKinsey's analysis of over 2,000 strategic initiatives found that 67% of failures could be traced to flawed initial problem framing. Not poor execution, flawed framing. The teams worked hard. They executed their plans. But they were executing the wrong plans because their thinking tools could not reveal what they were missing. Linear thinking does not just hide connections. It actively prevents your brain from finding them. Here is the neuroscience. When you read or write in linear format, you primarily activate your left hemisphere. The left hemisphere specializes in sequential processing, language, and logical analysis. These are valuable capabilities, but they represent only half of your cognitive potential. Your right hemisphere specializes in something different: pattern recognition, spatial relationships, holistic processing. The right hemisphere sees forests while the left hemisphere counts trees. Complex strategic thinking requires both hemispheres working together. You need sequential logic and pattern recognition. You need detailed analysis and big-picture perspective. You need trees and forests. Linear formats suppress right hemisphere engagement. They keep you locked in sequential mode, counting trees while the forest burns around you. Research from the University of California, Berkeley's Neuroscience Department used functional MRI imaging to study brain activation during different thinking tasks. When participants used linear note-taking, right hemisphere activation remained minimal. When they switched to spatial mapping formats, right hemisphere engagement increased by over 60%. Same information, same cognitive effort, radically different brain utilization. You have been thinking with half your brain. Now let us talk about speed. One of the great myths of linear thinking is that it is faster. Create a quick list. Jot down some bullets. Capture the essentials and move on. This feels efficient. It is not. Linear capture is faster. Linear thinking is dramatically slower. The time you save on the front end, you lose exponentially on the back end. Every time you need to understand how pieces connect, you must reread your entire list, holding items in working memory while searching for relationships. This is cognitively exhausting. It burns mental energy, and it produces worse outcomes than investing slightly more time in proper visual structuring up front. A productivity study from Drexel University tracked knowledge workers over a 6-month period. Workers who used linear planning methods spent an average of 34% more time in revision and rework compared to workers who used visual mapping methods. 34%. The quick list was not quick at all. It just moved the time cost somewhere less visible. But here is the most expensive cost of linear thinking, the one nobody calculates: opportunity cost. Every insight your brain fails to generate is an opportunity lost. Every connection you miss is a strategy unexplored. Every pattern you cannot see is a competitive advantage you hand to someone else. This cost is invisible. You cannot measure ideas you never had. You cannot quantify strategies that never occurred to you. You cannot calculate the value of clarity you never achieved. But the cost is real, and it compounds. Average thinkers optimize for visible efficiency. They count tasks completed and meetings attended. They measure hours worked and emails sent. These metrics are easy to track. They are also largely meaningless. Elite thinkers optimize for invisible leverage. They ask different questions. What am I not seeing? What connections am I missing? What would change everything if I understood it differently? These questions cannot be answered with linear thinking. They require a fundamentally different approach. Consider two executives facing the same market disruption. The first executive creates a detailed action plan. Linear, sequential, comprehensive. Every department gets assignments. Every timeline is specified. The plan looks thorough. It addresses the disruption as a series of problems to solve. The second executive maps the disruption visually. She sees how customer behavior changes affect supply chain requirements. She notices how supply chain changes create opportunities in adjacent markets. She identifies a leverage point that, if addressed correctly, transforms threat into advantage. Same disruption, same information available. Radically different outcomes. The first executive worked harder. The second executive saw further. This is not about intelligence. Both executives are smart. Both work hard. Both have access to the same data. The difference is entirely in how they structured their thinking. Now here is what makes this personal. Right now, you are facing complex challenges, career decisions, business strategies, life choices. Some of these challenges have solutions you have not found yet. Not because the solutions do not exist, not because you lack the intelligence to find them, but because your thinking format is hiding them from you. The connections are there. The patterns are there. The insights are waiting. But linear thinking has built walls around them. Walls you cannot see because the walls are made of the same material as your thinking. This is why changing your thinking method is not optional. It is not a nice-to-have productivity enhancement. It is the difference between finding solutions and forever missing them. But here is the question that should be forming in your mind. If linear thinking is so limited, why do elite performers outperform everyone else? What are they doing differently? What methods do they use that nobody taught you in school? The next chapter answers these questions directly. You will discover what researchers found when they studied the actual cognitive practices of top performers across multiple fields. The findings contradict almost everything conventional wisdom teaches about strategic thinking. And once you see what elite performers actually do, you will understand exactly why their results seem almost unfair. Chapter 3. How elite performers actually think. 2%. That is the fraction of professionals who consistently outperform their peers across every measurable dimension. 2 out of every 100. They close more deals. They solve harder problems. They rise faster. They earn more. And when researchers finally decoded what makes them different, the answer had nothing to do with talent, education, or luck. They think in pictures. Not metaphorically, literally. The highest performers in virtually every field share a cognitive pattern that separates them from everyone else. They externalize complexity visually before making decisions. They draw what others describe. They map what others list. They see what others merely read. In the next several minutes, you will discover exactly what researchers found when they studied elite cognition. You will learn the specific visual practices that top performers use and why these practices produce such disproportionate results. And you will understand why this information has remained hidden from most professionals despite decades of research. This is not theory. This is documented, replicated, and actionable. And it changes everything you thought you knew about high performance. Let us begin with the research that started it all. In 1972, psychologists Chase and Simon conducted a landmark study on expert performance. They wanted to understand why chess grandmasters could glance at a board and see strategic possibilities that took average players hours to analyze. The assumption was that grandmasters had superior memory. They could hold more information in their heads. The assumption was wrong. When researchers showed grandmasters and average players randomly arranged chess pieces, both groups performed equally poorly at recall. Grandmasters had no memory advantage whatsoever for random configurations. But when pieces were arranged in actual game positions, grandmasters demonstrated near-perfect recall while average players struggled. The difference was not memory capacity. It was pattern recognition. Grandmasters did not see individual pieces. They saw meaningful clusters, strategic formations, visual patterns that carried instant significance. This finding revolutionized cognitive science. It revealed that expertise is not about storing more information. It is about organizing information into recognizable visual patterns. But here is what most people miss about this research. Grandmasters did not develop this ability by accident. They trained it deliberately. They studied thousands of game positions. They mapped strategic patterns visually. They built mental libraries of recognizable formations. Their expertise was constructed through systematic visual encoding. And this same pattern appears everywhere researchers look. A study published in the Harvard Business Review examined decision-making practices among CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Researchers interviewed and observed 87 executives over a 3-year period, documenting their actual cognitive processes during high-stakes decisions. The finding that surprised everyone: 73% of the highest performing CEOs regularly used visual mapping during strategic thinking. Not occasionally, regularly. They sketched scenarios on whiteboards. They drew relationship diagrams. They created visual models of complex situations before committing to action. The lowest performing CEOs in the study relied almost exclusively on verbal and written analysis. Reports, memos, bullet-pointed presentations, linear formats that, as we established in the previous chapter, systematically hide connections and suppress pattern recognition. Same information available, same strategic challenges, radically different approaches to processing complexity. But this is not just about business. Consider military strategy. The United States Army War College conducted an extensive analysis of command decision-making under pressure. They studied after-action reports from hundreds of engagements, looking for patterns that distinguished successful commanders from unsuccessful ones. The pattern they found was striking. Successful commanders consistently created visual representations of the battlefield before making decisions. They drew maps. They sketched force positions. They physically manipulated objects to represent troop movements. This visual externalization allowed them to process more variables simultaneously and identify opportunities that pure verbal analysis would miss. Unsuccessful commanders relied more heavily on verbal briefings and written reports. They processed information linearly, and they consistently missed critical patterns that visual analysis would have revealed. This is not coincidence. This is cognitive architecture. Stop and consider what these findings mean for you. If visual thinking separates elite performers from everyone else across chess, business, and military strategy, what are the odds that your field is somehow different? What are the chances that your challenges are uniquely suited to linear processing while everyone else benefits from visual thinking? The answer is obvious. The pattern is universal because the brain is universal. Visual processing dominates human cognition regardless of domain. Yet most professionals have never been taught to leverage this. They received years of training in linear analysis. They learned to write reports, create outlines, and build bullet-pointed presentations. Nobody taught them to think visually because educational systems are designed for linear assessment. Here is what elite performers understand that average performers do not. Your brain thinks in two fundamentally different ways. Psychologists call these System 1 and System 2. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for documenting how these systems interact. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and logical. It processes information sequentially. It handles explicit reasoning. It is what you experience when you consciously work through a problem step by step. System 2 is essential for detailed analysis. System 1 is fast, automatic, and pattern-based. It processes information holistically. It recognizes patterns instantly. It is what fires when you glance at a situation and immediately sense something is wrong, even before you can articulate why. Here is the critical insight. System 1, your fast pattern recognition system, operates primarily through visual processing. It evolved to instantly assess visual scenes for threats and opportunities. It does not read bullet points. It sees patterns. When you trap your thinking in linear formats, you are essentially shutting down System 1. You are forcing all processing through the slow, sequential System 2 channel. This is like trying to win a race using only first gear. Elite performers engage both systems simultaneously. They externalize complexity visually, which activates System 1 pattern recognition. Then they apply System 2 analysis to the patterns System 1 identifies. This dual system approach produces insights that neither system could generate alone. Average thinkers use System 2 almost exclusively. They analyze. They deliberate. They reason step by step. They work extremely hard. And they consistently miss patterns that visual processing would reveal instantly. This explains something you have probably experienced but never understood. Have you ever struggled with a problem for hours, gotten nowhere, and then suddenly seen the solution the moment you stepped back and looked at it differently? That flash of insight was System 1 finally getting access to information that had been trapped in System 2 processing. The solution was always there. Your thinking format was hiding it. Now let me show you how elite performers structure this intentionally. Research from MIT Sloan School of Management studied strategic planning processes at high-growth companies. They wanted to understand why some companies consistently made better strategic decisions than their competitors. The highest-performing companies shared a specific practice. They began every strategic discussion with visual mapping. Before anyone presented data, before anyone argued positions, before any decisions were made, they created visual representations of the situation as a team. This simple practice produced measurable results. Companies using visual-first strategic planning showed 41% faster time to decision, 23% fewer strategic reversals, and 38% higher satisfaction with outcomes among leadership teams. Same data, same smart people, same competitive pressures. The only difference was engaging visual cognition before linear analysis. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all visual thinking is equally effective. Drawing random diagrams does not automatically produce insight. Sketching without structure can actually increase confusion rather than reduce it. Elite performers do not just think visually. They think visually using specific frameworks. They have systematic approaches to externalizing complexity, methods that reliably produce pattern recognition and strategic clarity. And the most powerful of these methods is one you have probably heard of, but almost certainly misunderstand. Mind mapping. But not mind mapping as most people practice it. Not the colorful note-taking technique taught in study skills workshops. Not the creative brainstorming exercise used in corporate retreats. Real mind mapping. Strategic mind mapping. The cognitive methodology that transforms how your brain processes complexity. The difference between casual mind mapping and strategic mind mapping is the difference between doodling and engineering. Both involve drawing. Only one produces reliable results. Most people who have tried mind mapping found it interesting, but not transformative. They created a few colorful diagrams. They felt slightly more organized, but their actual thinking did not fundamentally change. This is because they were using the tool without understanding the system. They had the technique, but not the methodology. It is like giving someone a piano and expecting them to play concertos. The instrument is necessary, but not sufficient. You also need to understand how to use it. The next chapter reveals what strategic mind mapping actually is and why it differs fundamentally from what most people have experienced. You will learn the specific methodology that transforms mind maps from a note-taking curiosity into a cognitive operating system. This is where everything you have learned so far comes together. The neuroscience of visual processing, the limitations of linear thinking, the practices of elite performers. All of it points to a specific approach that you can learn, practice, and master. And once you have this system, complexity becomes something different. Not something to fear or avoid, something to navigate with clarity and confidence. The paradigm shift begins now. Chapter 4. The Mind Map Paradigm Shift. 94%. That is the failure rate. 94% of people who try mind mapping abandon it within 3 months. They create a few diagrams, feel mildly interested, and return to their bullet points. The technique that could transform their thinking becomes another forgotten productivity experiment. But here is what those 94% never realize. They were not doing mind mapping. They were doing decorated note-taking. They had the form without the function, the appearance without the architecture. And that difference explains everything. In the next several minutes, you will understand exactly why most people fail with mind maps and what separates the 6% who experience transformation. You will discover the fundamental paradigm shift that turns mind mapping from a curiosity into a cognitive operating system. And you will see why everything you thought you knew about mind maps was probably wrong. This is not about technique. This is about reconceptualization. And once you make this shift, you will never think the same way again. Let us start with the mistake almost everyone makes. When most people learn about mind mapping, they learn it as a note-taking method. Put the main topic in the center. Draw branches for subtopics. Add smaller branches for details. Use colors and images to make it memorable. Create something more visual than traditional notes. This instruction is technically accurate and completely misses the point. It is like teaching someone to use a telescope by explaining how to hold it and look through it, without ever mentioning the stars. The mechanics are correct. The purpose is absent. Mind maps are not a better way to take notes. Mind maps are a different way to think. This distinction is not semantic. It is fundamental. And failing to understand it is why most people never experience the power of visual strategic thinking. Let me explain what I mean. Note-taking is about capture. You hear information, you record it. The goal is accurate storage for later retrieval. The measure of success is completeness. Did you get everything down? Thinking is about generation. You engage with complexity, you produce insight. The goal is not storage, but transformation. The measure of success is not completeness, but clarity. Do you understand what you did not understand before? These are fundamentally different cognitive activities, and they require fundamentally different approaches. When you use mind maps for note-taking, you are using a sports car to deliver groceries. It works. The groceries arrive, but you have completely wasted the vehicle's actual capability. You could have used a bicycle and achieved the same result with less complexity. This is why most mind mapping feels underwhelming. People use a thinking tool for a storage task, experience marginal improvement, and conclude the tool is overhyped. The tool is not overhyped. It is misapplied. Now here is the paradigm shift. Stop thinking of mind maps as a way to organize information you already have. Start thinking of mind maps as a way to discover information you do not have yet. Read that again because it changes everything. Average practitioners use mind maps to record what they know. They put existing thoughts onto paper in a visual format. This is marginally useful. It is also missing 90% of the value. Elite practitioners use mind maps to reveal what they do not know. They externalize complexity specifically to discover connections, patterns, and insights that were invisible while trapped inside their head. They are not recording. They are exploring. They are not organizing existing thoughts. They are generating new ones. This is why elite performers can look at the same information everyone else has and see opportunities nobody else sees. They are not smarter. They are using a thinking process that reliably produces insight. A study from the University of Melbourne's Department of Cognitive Psychology examined this distinction directly. Researchers gave participants complex business scenarios and asked them to analyze the situation using mind maps. Half the participants were instructed to use mind maps for organizing their existing thoughts. Half were instructed to use mind maps for discovering new connections. Same tool, same scenarios, different instructions. The discovery-oriented group generated 3 times more novel insights. 3 times. And more importantly, their insights were rated significantly higher in strategic value by independent expert evaluators. The tool did not change. The paradigm changed. And that changed everything. But this raises an important question. If mind maps are thinking tools rather than storage tools, what makes them effective for thinking? Why do visual radial structures produce insight that linear formats cannot? The answer lies in how your brain naturally processes information. Your brain does not think in lines. It thinks in associations. When you encounter any concept, your brain immediately activates related concepts. Say the word hospital and your brain automatically activates doctor, nurse, medicine, emergency, insurance, and dozens of other connected ideas. This happens instantly, automatically, and non-linearly. Associations spread outward in all directions simultaneously. This associative architecture is fundamental to human cognition. It is how memory works. It is how learning works. It is how creativity works. Every thought you have is connected to countless other thoughts in a vast web of associations. Now consider what happens when you force this associative brain to work in linear format. Your brain generates an idea. You write it down on line 1. Your brain generates an associated idea. But wait, that association does not fit neatly after line 1. It connects to something else. Where does it go? You force it onto line 2 anyway. Your brain generates another association. This one connects to the first idea, but not the second. More forcing, more loss. Linear formats impose artificial sequence on naturally non-sequential thinking. Every time you force an association into a line, you sever its connection to related ideas. You lose the web. You lose the context. You lose exactly what makes the thought valuable. This is why you can take detailed linear notes on a complex topic and still feel like you do not really understand it. You captured the pieces but destroyed the connections. Mind maps preserve what linear formats destroy. When you place a concept in the center and let associations radiate outward, you are working with your brain's natural architecture instead of against it. Branches connect visually. Relationships remain visible. The web stays intact. But here is the deeper truth that transforms everything. When associations remain visually connected, your brain can do something linear formats make impossible. It can see patterns across associations. It can notice that branch 3 and branch 7 share something unexpected. It can recognize that the connection between branch 2 and branch 5 changes everything. This is where insight lives, not in individual ideas, in the space between ideas, in the connections that only become visible when you stop forcing linearity onto nonlinear thinking. Stanford neuroscientist Dr. Robert Sapolsky describes this phenomenon as emergence. Complex systems produce properties that cannot be predicted from individual components. Your brain is the most complex system we know, and insight emerges from the interaction of ideas, not from ideas in isolation. Linear formats isolate ideas. Mind maps let them interact. Now let us talk about what this means practically. There is a specific moment in mind mapping when the paradigm shift becomes tangible. I call it the connection moment. It happens when you are building a map, adding branches, externalizing complexity, and suddenly you see something. Two branches that seemed unrelated reveal an unexpected connection. A pattern emerges that was invisible seconds earlier. Your brain makes a leap it could not have made without visual externalization. This moment is not magic. It is mechanism. It is what happens when you give your visual cortex access to complexity that was previously trapped in working memory. But here is what separates strategic mind mapping from casual diagramming. Casual mind mappers wait for connection moments to happen accidentally. Sometimes they occur. Often they do not. The practice feels hit or miss because it is hit or miss. Strategic mind mappers engineer connection moments deliberately. They use specific techniques to increase the probability of insight. They structure their maps to maximize pattern visibility. They know exactly how to move from externalization to discovery. This is not creativity. This is methodology. And methodology can be taught. The difference between hoping for insight and systematically producing insight is the difference between amateur and elite. Both use the same basic tool. Only one has the system that makes the tool reliable. Consider the implications for your own challenges. Right now, you have complex problems that feel stuck. Career decisions with too many variables. Business strategies with unclear trade-offs. Life choices that seem impossible to think through clearly. The insights you need to resolve these challenges exist. The connections that would create clarity are there. But they are trapped. Trapped inside your head, where working memory cannot hold them all simultaneously. Trapped in linear formats that hide the relationships between them. Strategic mind mapping is the key that unlocks what is already there. Not by giving you new information, by letting you see the information you already have in a way that reveals its structure. Not by making you smarter, by letting you use the intelligence you already possess. But knowing that mind maps are thinking tools rather than storage tools is only the beginning. The question that matters is how. How do you structure a map for strategic insight? How do you move from externalization to discovery? How do you engineer the connection moments that produce clarity? The next chapter answers these questions directly. You will learn the strategic mind mapping framework, a four-step system that transforms any complex challenge into visual clarity. Capture, connect, compress, act. Each step builds on the previous. Each step moves you closer to decision-ready insight. This is where theory becomes practice, where understanding becomes application, where the paradigm shift you have experienced in these pages becomes a tool you can use starting today. The framework is waiting, and once you have it, complexity will never feel the same again. Chapter 5. The Strategic Mind Mapping Framework. For steps, that is all that separates mental chaos from strategic clarity. For steps, not 400, not 40, 4. And when you understand how these steps work together, You will possess a system that transforms any complex challenge into actionable insight. Most people overcomplicate strategic thinking. They believe clarity requires extensive analysis, countless meetings, and sophisticated tools. They spend weeks drowning in information, hoping understanding will eventually emerge. It rarely does. Elite performers know something different. Clarity is not found through more analysis. Clarity is engineered through better structure. And the structure that works, the structure backed by cognitive science and proven across thousands of applications, fits into 4 simple steps. Capture, connect, compress, act. In the next several minutes, you will learn exactly how this framework operates. You will understand why each step exists and what it produces. And you will have a complete system you can apply to any complex decision starting today. This is the methodology that separates strategic thinkers from everyone else. Let us begin. Step 1. Capture. Before you can think strategically about any challenge, you must first externalize everything related to that challenge. Everything. Not the important things. Not the obvious things. Everything your brain contains about the situation. This step sounds simple. It is not. Most people begin analysis by trying to identify what matters. They filter immediately. They judge quickly. They capture only what seems relevant. This is exactly wrong. When you filter during capture, you are making judgments before you understand the full picture. You are deciding what matters before you can see how things connect. You are using your conscious mind to evaluate what your pattern recognition system has not yet processed. Research from the University of Texas at Austin's Department of Psychology studied idea generation under different conditions. One group was instructed to capture only their best ideas. Another group was instructed to capture every idea without judgment. The groups then evaluated all ideas for strategic value. The non-filtering group produced 73% more high-value ideas. 73%. The ideas they would have filtered out often became the most valuable once connections became visible. Your conscious mind is terrible at predicting which information will matter. It cannot see connections that have not been made yet. When you filter during capture, you systematically eliminate exactly the raw material your pattern recognition system needs. Here is how elite performers handle capture. They begin with what I call the brain dump. They take their challenge and externalize everything. Facts, assumptions, questions, concerns, related experiences, random associations, half-formed thoughts. Nothing is too small. Nothing is too obvious. Nothing is too tangential. This process typically takes 15 to 20 minutes for a significant challenge. It feels messy. It looks chaotic. It is supposed to. You place your central challenge in the middle of your map. Then you radiate outward with every associated element your brain produces. You do not organize. You do not evaluate. You simply capture. The goal of step 1 is completeness, not clarity. Clarity comes later. First, you need everything visible. Average thinkers skip this step. They believe they already know what matters. They jump straight to analysis. And they consistently miss critical elements that would have changed their conclusions. Elite thinkers trust the process. They capture completely before analyzing anything. They know that the most valuable insights often come from elements that initially seemed irrelevant. Step 2. Connect. Once everything is externalized, your brain can do what it does best. Recognize patterns. In the connect phase, you stop adding new elements and start examining relationships. You look at what you have captured and ask specific questions. What relates to what? What causes what? What depends on what? What contradicts what? This is where the magic happens. Remember the connection moments we discussed in the previous chapter. This is where you engineer them deliberately. By scanning your externalized complexity for relationships, you activate your visual cortex's pattern recognition capabilities. You let System 1 do what linear analysis cannot. Here is the specific technique. After completing your brain dump, take a different colored pen or marker. Begin drawing lines between elements that relate to each other. Do not worry about creating a perfect diagram. The lines are thinking tools, not presentation graphics. As you draw connections, you will notice something remarkable. Relationships you never consciously recognized become obvious. Elements that seemed unrelated reveal hidden dependencies. Patterns emerge from chaos. A study from the London School of Economics examined strategic planning effectiveness across 120 organizations. They found that teams who explicitly mapped relationships between strategic elements produced plans rated 31% more robust by independent evaluators. The relationship mapping did not add new information. It revealed structure that was always present but invisible. During the connect phase, you are not inventing relationships. You are discovering them. The connections exist in reality. Your brain knew about them implicitly. Visual externalization makes them explicit. But here's what separates good connection mapping from great connection mapping. Do not just connect similar things. Look specifically for unexpected connections. Look for elements from different branches that share something non-obvious. Look for contradictions that reveal hidden tensions. Look for gaps where connections should exist, but do not. The obvious connections give you incremental insight. The non-obvious connections give you strategic advantage. Elite performers spend significant time in this phase. They resist the urge to jump to conclusions. They keep scanning, keep connecting, keep looking for patterns that less patient thinkers would miss. Average performers rush through connection. They make a few obvious links and declare themselves done. They capture the low-hanging fruit and leave the strategic gold undiscovered. Step 3. Compress. This is where most mind mapping goes wrong. People capture beautifully. They connect reasonably well. Then they stare at a complex web of information and feel just as overwhelmed as when they started. Compression is the missing step that transforms visual complexity into strategic clarity. Here is the principle. Your brain cannot act on complexity. It can only act on simplicity. A map with 50 elements and 100 connections is useful for understanding. It is useless for deciding. In the compress phase, you take your connected map and extract the essential structure. You identify the 3 to 5 elements that actually drive the situation. You find the leverage points where intervention creates disproportionate impact. You reduce overwhelming complexity to actionable simplicity. This is not about ignoring information. It is about finding the information that matters most. The human brain has a cognitive limit for simultaneous strategic variables. Research from Carnegie Mellon's Department of Decision Science found that decision quality peaks when people focus on 3 to 5 key factors. Below 3, you miss critical variables. Above 5, cognitive overload degrades judgment. Compression takes your comprehensive map and asks a specific question. If I could only focus on 3 things, what would they be? This question forces prioritization. It demands that you distinguish between important and essential. It transforms a complex map into a strategic focus. Here is the technique. Look at your connected map and identify the nodes with the most connections. These are your leverage points. Elements that connect to many other elements tend to have disproportionate influence on the system. Change one of these, and you change many things. Next, look for elements that appear in multiple connection chains. These are your dependencies. They determine what is possible before other actions can succeed. Finally, look for elements that connect to your ultimate objective most directly. These are your critical path items. Everything else is secondary. From this analysis, select your top 3 to 5 strategic priorities. Draw a new, simpler map with only these elements and their direct relationships. This compressed map becomes your decision framework. Average thinkers try to address everything simultaneously. They create action plans with 20 priorities, which means they have no priorities. They spread attention across the entire complexity and make progress on nothing. Elite thinkers compress ruthlessly. They accept that focusing on the essential means temporarily ignoring the rest. They trust that addressing leverage points will resolve secondary issues. They choose strategic clarity over comprehensive confusion. Step 4. Act. The purpose of strategic thinking is not to create beautiful maps. It is to produce better decisions and more effective action. The act phase translates your compressed strategic focus into specific next steps. This is where many frameworks fail. They produce insight without producing movement. They clarify without catalyzing. The strategic mind mapping framework treats action as integral, not optional. Here's how it works. For each element in your compressed map, you define a specific action, not a vague intention, a specific, concrete next step that you could complete within the next 48 hours. The 48-hour constraint is crucial. Research from Dominican University found that goals with specific immediate actions were 42% more likely to be achieved than goals without defined next steps. The gap between insight and implementation is where most strategic thinking dies. Specific immediate action bridges that gap. Your action map takes your 3 to 5 strategic priorities and assigns each one a concrete next step. Who will do what by when? No ambiguity, no vagueness, just clear accountability and timeline. But the act phase does more than generate to-do items. Because you have completed the previous 3 steps, your actions are strategically aligned. They address leverage points rather than symptoms. They follow the natural dependency structure of the situation. They focus on what matters rather than what feels urgent. This is the difference between busy action and strategic action. Busy action addresses whatever seems most pressing in the moment. Strategic action addresses what creates the greatest impact on your actual objectives. The 4 steps work together as a system. Capture ensures you have complete raw material. Connect reveals the structure hidden in that material. Compress extracts the essential from the comprehensive. Act translates insight into movement. Skip any step and the system breaks down. Skip capture and you miss critical elements. Skip connect and you fail to see patterns. Skip compress and you drown in complexity. Skip act and your insight produces no results. This is why most mind mapping fails to produce transformation. People learn 1 or 2 steps. They capture without connecting. They connect without compressing. They analyze without acting. The system needs all 4 steps to generate reliable strategic clarity. Now here's what matters. This framework is not theory. It is not an interesting idea to consider. It is a tool to use, starting with your next complex decision. The next chapter goes deeper into one of the most valuable applications of this framework: decision compression. When you face high-stakes choices with too many variables, how do you use strategic mind mapping to cut through confusion and decide with confidence? The technique you will learn has been used by executives facing billion-dollar decisions, entrepreneurs choosing between competing opportunities, and professionals navigating career-defining moments. And once you have it, decisions that once paralyzed you will become moments of clarity and conviction. The framework is yours. Now let us see what it can really do. Chapter 6. Decision compression. Simplify before you act. 35,000. That is how many decisions you make every day. 35,000. Most are trivial. What to wear? What to eat? Which email to answer first? But buried in that avalanche are the decisions that actually matter. Career moves, business pivots, investment choices, relationship commitments. And here's the problem. Your brain treats the trivial and the critical almost identically. The same cognitive machinery that selects your breakfast processes your life-changing decisions. No wonder clarity feels impossible. But elite decision makers have discovered something. The secret to better decisions is not more analysis. It is strategic compression. Reduce complexity before you choose, and the right choice becomes obvious. In the next several minutes, you will learn exactly how decision compression works. You will understand why most people make decisions harder than necessary and how to make them simpler without losing accuracy. And you will gain a specific technique for transforming overwhelming choices into clear action. This is the difference between decision paralysis and decision confidence. Let us begin. First, understand why decisions feel so difficult. When you face a significant choice, your brain does something counterproductive. It tries to hold all variables simultaneously. It attempts to compare every option against every criterion at the same time. It reaches for certainty before taking action. This approach sounds logical. It is actually catastrophic. Remember the cognitive limits we discussed earlier. Your working memory holds 7 items, plus or minus 2. That is your total bandwidth for conscious processing. Now consider a moderately complex decision. A job change, for instance. You have multiple options. Current job, offer from company A, offer from company B, possibility of starting your own venture. Each option has multiple dimensions: salary, growth potential, work-life balance, cultural fit, geographic implications, risk profile, learning opportunities, alignment with long-term goals. 4 options times 8 dimensions equals 32 variables. You are trying to process 32 variables with a system designed for 7. This is why decisions feel overwhelming. Not because you lack intelligence, because the task exceeds your cognitive architecture. A study from Columbia Business School examined decision quality under varying complexity conditions. Researchers found that decision accuracy actually decreased as the number of considered variables increased beyond a threshold. More analysis produced worse decisions. The researchers called this the paradox of choice. Beyond a certain point, additional information and additional options degrade rather than improve decision quality. Your brain becomes overloaded. It starts making shortcuts, often the wrong shortcuts. This finding contradicts everything we are taught about decision-making. Conventional wisdom says gather more information, consider more angles, analyze more thoroughly. The research says the opposite. At some point, you must stop gathering and start compressing. Here is what elite decision-makers understand. The goal is not to consider everything. The goal is to identify what actually matters and ignore the rest. This sounds obvious. It is extraordinarily difficult in practice, because everything feels like it matters when you are inside the decision. Every variable seems important. Every consideration seems relevant. Your brain cannot distinguish essential from peripheral when it is overwhelmed with complexity. Compression requires externalization. You cannot simplify what you cannot see. This is where strategic mind mapping transforms decision-making. By externalizing the entire decision visually, you give your brain the perspective it needs to identify what truly matters. Here is the specific technique. I call it the decision compression protocol. Start by placing your decision in the center of your map. Frame it as a clear question, not a vague topic. A specific question you need to answer. Which job should I accept? Should we launch product A or product B? Where should we focus our resources next quarter? The framing matters. Vague framing produces vague thinking. Precise questions produce actionable answers. Next, radiate your options outward. Each major choice becomes a primary branch. Do not evaluate yet. Simply capture every viable option, including options you have not seriously considered. Sometimes the best choice is one you almost dismissed. Now here is where compression begins. For each option, ask one question. What is the single most important thing this option offers or threatens? Not the 5 most important things. The single most important thing. This constraint forces prioritization. Your brain resists it. Your brain wants to list everything. Override that instinct. Identify the one factor that matters most for each option. A study from the Max Planck Institute for Human Development tested this single-factor approach against comprehensive multi-factor analysis. Participants made predictions about complex real-world outcomes using either method. The single-factor approach matched or exceeded multi-factor analysis in accuracy. In several domains, it significantly outperformed comprehensive analysis. Focusing on the single most important factor eliminated noise and clarified signal. After identifying the key factor for each option, step back and look at your map. You have transformed a complex decision into a simple comparison. Option A offers factor X. Option B offers factor Y. Option C offers factor Z. Which factor matters most to you right now? This is compression. The decision has not changed. Your ability to see the decision clearly has transformed. But wait, what about all the other factors? What about the variables you ignored? Here is the insight that frees you from analysis paralysis. Most factors in any decision are either secondary or derivative. Secondary factors matter less than primary factors by definition. If they mattered more, they would be primary. Derivative factors depend on primary factors. They resolve themselves once the primary factor is addressed. When you focus on the single most important factor for each option, you are not ignoring everything else. You are trusting that everything else will either follow the primary factor or prove irrelevant compared to it. Average decision makers try to optimize across all dimensions simultaneously. They create elaborate spreadsheets with weighted criteria. They score each option on dozens of factors. They calculate and compare endlessly, and they often end up more confused than when they started. Elite decision makers find the one thing that matters most and let it decide. They trust that getting the primary factor right outweighs imperfection on secondary factors. This is not lazy thinking. This is strategic thinking, recognizing that attention is finite and allocating it to maximum impact. Now let me show you a more advanced compression technique. Some decisions genuinely have multiple essential factors. You cannot reduce to one without losing critical information. For these situations, use what I call the 2x2 compression. After your initial brain dump, identify the two dimensions that matter most. Not 3, not 4, 2. For a career decision, it might be growth potential and work-life balance. For a product decision, it might be market size and execution difficulty. For an investment decision, it might be return potential and downside risk. Create a simple 2x2 grid using these dimensions. High growth, high balance. High growth, low balance. Low growth, high balance. Low growth, low balance. Place each option in its appropriate quadrant. Suddenly, a complex multivariable decision becomes a visual comparison across two dimensions. Your brain can handle two dimensions easily. The choice becomes clear. Research from Harvard Business School found that executives who used two-dimensional frameworks for complex decisions reported 63% higher confidence in their choices and showed 28% less decision regret in follow-up surveys. The framework did not make the decision easier by removing complexity. It made the decision clearer by compressing complexity into a structure the brain can process effectively. Here is another technique for decisions with significant uncertainty. Many high-stakes decisions involve factors you cannot know in advance. You are not just weighing known variables. You are making bets about unknown futures. Will the market shift? Will the technology succeed? Will the relationship last? For these decisions, use what I call the regret minimization frame. Instead of asking which option is best, ask a different question. 10 years from now, which choice would I most regret not making? Jeff Bezos famously used this framework when deciding whether to leave a successful Wall Street career to start Amazon. The logical analysis was ambiguous. The regret question was clear. He knew he would regret not trying far more than he would regret trying and failing. Here is how to apply this with mind mapping. Create a branch for each option. Under each branch, map two scenarios. The scenario where the option succeeds and the scenario where it fails. For each scenario, capture your emotional response. How would you feel about having made this choice? This exercise bypasses analytical paralysis and accesses a deeper knowing. Your emotional response to imagined futures often reveals preferences that pure logic obscures. Elite decision-makers trust this emotional data. They understand that decisions are not purely logical calculations. They involve values, priorities, and personal meaning that spreadsheets cannot capture. Average decision-makers dismiss emotional signals as irrational. They keep analyzing, hoping logic alone will produce certainty. It never does. Now here is the critical point about all decision compression. Speed matters. The longer you delay a decision, the more cognitive resources you consume. Every day of indecision is a day of mental energy diverted from execution. Every week of analysis is a week of opportunity cost. Research from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School found that executives who made strategic decisions faster, without sacrificing decision quality, significantly outperformed slower deciding peers. Speed was not about recklessness. It was about recognizing when additional analysis would not improve the decision. Decision compression enables speed. By reducing complexity to its essential structure, you reach clarity faster. You stop spinning in analytical loops. You decide and move. The framework you learned in the previous chapter, capture, connect, compress, act, is designed for this. The compress step is not optional. It is where decisions transform from overwhelming to obvious. But compression requires something most people lack: the ability to see patterns in complexity, to recognize which factors are truly primary and which are disguised distractions, to find signal in noise. This ability is not mysterious. It is trainable, and the next chapter teaches you exactly how to develop it. Pattern recognition is the skill that separates strategic thinkers from everyone else. It is how elite performers look at the same information everyone else has and see what others miss. It is the cognitive capability that compression depends on. And once you understand how pattern recognition works and how to strengthen it, you will not just make better decisions. You will see the world differently than you ever have before. The ability to see what others miss is closer than you think. Chapter 7. Pattern Recognition. See what others miss. 0.1 seconds. That is how long it takes your brain to recognize a face. 1/10 of a second. Before you consciously register seeing someone, your pattern recognition system has already identified them, retrieved memories associated with them, and begun preparing an emotional response. This same system can identify strategic opportunities, detect hidden risks, and find solutions invisible to linear analysis. But only if you know how to activate it. Most people never learn. They rely on slow, conscious analysis for complex challenges while their most powerful cognitive system sits idle. They work harder while their brain's pattern recognition engine waits, and used, capable of insights they will never access. In the next several minutes, you will understand exactly how pattern recognition works and why it matters for strategic thinking. You will learn specific techniques for activating this capability deliberately, and you will discover why mind mapping is the key that unlocks your brain's hidden perceptual power. This is not about becoming smarter. This is about using the intelligence you already have. Let us begin. First, understand what pattern recognition actually is. Your brain is fundamentally a pattern detection machine. This is its primary function. Every perception, every memory, every thought involves pattern recognition at some level. When you read these words, your brain recognizes letter patterns instantly. You do not consciously decode each letter. You see patterns and extract meaning automatically. When you hear music, your brain recognizes melodic patterns, anticipates what comes next, and responds emotionally to violations of expectation. This capability is ancient. It evolved because survival depended on recognizing patterns quickly. Is that shape in the grass a stick or a snake? Is that person's expression friendly or threatening? Is that sound the wind or a predator? Organisms that recognized patterns faster survived and reproduced. Organisms that relied on slow deliberation became lunch. You inherited this system. It operates continuously, automatically, below conscious awareness. It processes the 11 million bits of information your senses receive every second and extracts meaningful patterns without any effort on your part. Here is what makes this relevant for strategic thinking. The patterns your brain can recognize are not limited to faces and snakes. Your pattern recognition system can identify strategic patterns just as easily. Market trends, organizational dynamics, competitive threats, opportunity windows. Your brain can see these patterns instantly, but only under specific conditions. The condition is visual externalization. Research from Johns Hopkins University's Department of Cognitive Science examined pattern recognition across different information formats. Participants analyzed identical complex datasets presented in 3 ways: numerical tables, written descriptions, visual diagrams. Pattern detection accuracy was 47% higher with visual presentation. 47%. The information was identical. Only the format changed. Visual formats activated pattern recognition capabilities that other formats left dormant. This finding has profound implications. When you trap complex information inside your head or in linear text formats, you are blocking your most powerful analytical capability from accessing it. You are trying to find patterns using a system designed for sequential logic, while your pattern recognition system cannot even see the data. Strategic mind mapping solves this problem. By externalizing complexity visually, you give your pattern recognition system what it needs. You let it see the information, and when it can see, it can do what it was designed to do. But here is what separates elite pattern recognition from average perception. Average thinkers see obvious patterns, the ones that jump out immediately, the connections everyone notices. Elite thinkers see second-order patterns, patterns within patterns. Relationships between relationships. The subtle structures that reveal strategic leverage. This difference is not about intelligence. It is about attention and technique. Let me explain. When you first look at a mind map, your brain immediately identifies obvious patterns, clusters of related items, direct connections between elements, major themes and categories. This happens automatically, without effort. Most people stop here. They see the obvious patterns, feel satisfied, and move on. Elite thinkers pause. They ask specific questions that direct attention to non-obvious patterns. They scan deliberately for what is not immediately apparent. Here are the questions that unlock second-order patterns. First question: what appears in multiple branches? When the same element or concept appears in different parts of your map, it signals hidden importance. This element is a node. It connects parts of the system that seem separate on the surface. Nodes are leverage points. Change a node, and you change multiple branches simultaneously. Average thinkers miss nodes because they examine branches in isolation. Elite thinkers scan across branches, specifically looking for repetition. Second question: what is conspicuously absent? Your brain naturally focuses on what is present. It takes deliberate effort to notice absence. But missing elements often reveal more than present ones. When you map a competitive situation and notice that none of your branches mention customer experience, that absence is significant. When you map a career decision and realize financial security appears nowhere, that gap reveals hidden assumptions. Elite thinkers train themselves to ask, what is not here that should be? This question consistently reveals blind spots that obvious pattern recognition misses. Third question: what contradicts what? Contradictions are uncomfortable. Your brain naturally tries to resolve them or ignore them. But unresolved contradictions in a map signal something important. Either your understanding is incomplete or the situation contains genuine tension that must be addressed. When two branches of your map point in opposite directions, do not smooth over the conflict. Investigate it. The contradiction often contains the insight you most need. A study from the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business found that executives who deliberately sought contradictions in strategic analysis produced plans rated 34% more robust than executives who saw consistency. Contradictions reveal complexity that neat narratives hide. Fourth question: what connects to the most other things? Highly connected elements have disproportionate influence. They affect many parts of the system simultaneously. Changing them creates cascading effects. When you identify the most connected elements in your map, you have found your strategic leverage points. These are where intervention produces maximum impact with minimum effort. Average thinkers spread attention equally across all elements. Elite thinkers identify high connection nodes and focus disproportionately there. Now here is how to train pattern recognition systematically. Pattern recognition improves with practice. The more patterns you expose your brain to, the more patterns it can recognize. This is why experienced professionals see things novices miss. Their brains have accumulated vast libraries of recognized patterns. But random experience is inefficient. Deliberate pattern training accelerates development dramatically. Here is the technique. Create mind maps of situations you want to understand better, not just your own challenges. Case studies, historical events, industry dynamics, competitive landscapes. Each map you create trains your pattern recognition system. After creating each map, spend 5 minutes specifically looking for second-order patterns. Ask the 4 questions. What appears multiple times? What is absent? What contradicts? What connects most? Document the patterns you find. Write them down. This act of conscious articulation reinforces the pattern in memory and makes it available for future recognition. Research from Florida State University's Expert Performance Lab found that deliberate pattern practice produced measurable improvement in pattern recognition speed and accuracy within 3 weeks. 21 days of focused practice significantly enhanced cognitive capability that most people believe is fixed. Your pattern recognition system is not static. It is trainable, but it requires deliberate practice, not passive exposure. Here is another technique elite performers use. Before analyzing any complex situation, They prime their pattern recognition system with relevant frameworks. A framework is a known pattern structure. Porter's 5 Forces is a framework for competitive analysis. SWOT is a framework for strategic assessment. Jobs to be done is a framework for understanding customer motivation. When you load a framework into conscious awareness before creating a map, your pattern recognition system uses that framework as a template. It actively looks for elements that fit the structure. It notices gaps where expected elements are missing. This is not about forcing situations into frameworks. It is about using frameworks to enhance perception. The framework directs attention. It tells your pattern recognition system what to look for. Elite analysts cycle through multiple frameworks when examining complex situations. Each framework reveals different patterns. Each perspective illuminates different aspects of the same reality. Average analysts use one framework or none. They see only what their limited perspective permits. They miss patterns that alternative frameworks would reveal instantly. Now here is the integration that transforms capability. Pattern recognition and mind mapping create a reinforcing cycle. Mind mapping externalizes complexity in visual format, which activates pattern recognition. Pattern recognition identifies structures in the visual information. Those recognized patterns inform how you develop and refine your map. The refined map reveals additional patterns. Each cycle produces deeper insight. This is why strategic mind mapping becomes more powerful with practice. You are not just improving a technique. You are training a cognitive capability. Each map makes your pattern recognition system stronger, which makes your next map more insightful. The compound returns are enormous. After 6 months of consistent practice, you will see patterns in complex situations that you currently miss entirely. Patterns that others will never see because they never trained this capability. This is the true competitive advantage of strategic mind mapping. Not the maps themselves, the enhanced perception that creating maps develops. But pattern recognition has a limitation you must understand. Your brain can only recognize patterns it has some basis for recognizing. Completely novel patterns are invisible until you encounter them enough times to build recognition. This is why the next chapter matters so much. Real-world applications train pattern recognition faster than any other method. When you apply strategic mind mapping to actual business scenarios, career decisions, and complex challenges, you build pattern libraries grounded in practical reality. The next chapter shows you exactly how to do this. You will see strategic mind mapping applied to high-stakes situations, product launches, career pivots, organizational challenges. Each example builds your pattern library while demonstrating the methodology in action. Theory becomes practice. Capability becomes results. The patterns are waiting to be seen, and you are closer to seeing them than you realize. Chapter 8. From Chaos to Clarity, Real-World Applications. 14 days. That is how long Sarah had to decide. 14 days to choose between her current executive position, a startup equity offer, and launching her own consulting practice. 3 paths. Incompatible futures. A decision that would shape the next decade of her life. She had spent 2 weeks in analysis paralysis. Spreadsheets comparing compensation. Lists of pros and cons conversations with mentors who gave conflicting advice. The more she analyzed, the more confused she became. Then she tried something different. She applied strategic mind mapping to her decision. 90 minutes later, she had clarity she had not felt in months. Not just a decision, conviction. In the next several minutes, you will see exactly how this happened. You will witness strategic mind mapping applied to real scenarios. Career crossroads. Product strategy. Organizational complexity. Each example demonstrates the methodology in action and builds your pattern library for similar challenges you will face. This is where theory becomes transformation. Let us begin. Scenario 1. The career crossroads. Sarah placed her central question in the middle of her map. Where should I invest my next decade? Not which job should I take? The deeper question behind the surface decision. She began the capture phase. Everything related to the decision radiated outward. Current role offered stability, established relationships, clear promotion path, but growing boredom. Startup offer promised equity upside, learning acceleration, mission alignment, but financial risk and brutal hours. Consulting practice meant freedom, variety, income potential, but isolation, business development burden, and uncertain pipeline. But Capture went deeper than options. She mapped her values: impact, autonomy, financial security, learning, family time. She mapped her fears: regret, failure, stagnation, disappointing others. She mapped her hidden assumptions: that stability meant safety, that equity meant wealth, that independence meant loneliness. 15 minutes of pure externalization. No judgment, no filtering, everything visible. Then the connect phase transformed everything. She drew lines between elements. Family time connected to financial security. Not because money bought time, but because financial stress consumed mental energy her family deserved. Learning connected to impact. Her greatest contributions always came during periods of intense growth. Autonomy connected to boredom. Her current boredom stemmed directly from lack of control over her work. Then she saw it, the pattern that changed everything. Her fear of failure in consulting connected to disappointing others. Her assumption that the startup meant risk connected to the same fear. But her fear of stagnation, the one she had been ignoring, connected to her current path directly. She was afraid of the wrong thing. She was optimizing against failure while her actual risk was stagnation. Staying safe was the dangerous choice. The compress phase became simple. One question dominated: which path offers the growth that matters most? Startup provided external growth: new skills, new networks, new experiences. Consulting provided internal growth: self-reliance, business acumen, personal brand. Current role provided neither. The decision was not between three options. It was between two types of growth and one path of gradual decline disguised as stability. She chose consulting, not because the analysis proved it optimal, because the mapping revealed it was the only choice aligned with who she wanted to become. Her action step was immediate: resign within 30 days. Announce her practice. Secure 2 anchor clients before departure. 90 minutes from confusion to conviction. Not because the decision became easier, because she finally saw what she was actually deciding. Average professionals face career decisions by comparing external factors: salary, title, company prestige. They optimize spreadsheets and remain confused because spreadsheets cannot capture what actually matters. Elite professionals use decisions as mirrors. They map not just options but values, fears, and hidden assumptions. They find the question behind the question. And when they see clearly, the choice makes itself. Scenario 2. The product strategy dilemma. Marcus led product development at a mid-sized software company. Leadership demanded a decision. Should they build feature A that their largest customers requested, or feature B that would open a new market segment? The pressure was intense. Feature A satisfied existing revenue. Feature B promised future growth. Both required the same engineering resources. They could not do both. Marcus had data. Customer surveys showed 72% wanted feature. Market research indicated feature B addressed a segment 3 times their current market size. His team was split. His board was impatient. He applied the strategic mind mapping framework. Central question: what builds the most valuable company over 5 years? Not which feature to build. The strategic question underneath the tactical choice. Capture revealed layers invisible to the initial framing. Feature A connected to customer retention, implementation complexity, competitive parity, and sales team comfort. Feature B connected to market expansion, technical debt, hiring requirements, brand repositioning, and competitive differentiation. But Capture also revealed elements nobody had discussed. Engineering morale was low. The team was tired of building what customers demanded rather than what they believed was right. Sales compensation incentivized renewals over new business. The board included 2 members who had failed at market expansion in previous companies. The full map contained 43 elements. Far too many for direct analysis. But patterns emerged immediately in the connect phase. Feature A had more connections to short-term metrics and existing stakeholder comfort. Feature B had more connections to long-term value creation and team motivation. But the critical insight came from an unexpected connection. Engineering morale connected to feature B. Team motivation connected to product quality. Product quality connected to customer retention. The assumption that feature helped retention was wrong. Building what customers requested would decrease retention if it demoralized the team that had to maintain it. Compression clarified the choice. The real decision was between optimizing for current stakeholders or building for future value. Feature B addressed both by creating the conditions for sustainable quality. The action map included 3 elements. Present the strategic case to the board with the full mind map visible. Restructure sales compensation to reward new market entry. Announce Feature B to the team with transparent reasoning. 6 months later, Feature B launched. New market revenue exceeded projections by 40%. Engineering turnover dropped to its lowest level in 3 years. The largest customers who had demanded Feature A renewed anyway, citing overall product trajectory as their reason. Average product leaders optimize for the loudest voices. Customer demands, board pressure, sales complaints. They react to inputs without seeing how inputs connect. Elite product leaders map the full system. They find hidden connections between morale and quality, between stakeholder comfort and long-term value. They make decisions others consider risky because they see stability others miss. Scenario 3. The Organizational Complexity Challenge. Priya had just become COO of a healthcare company in crisis. 3 acquisitions in 2 years had created chaos. Duplicate systems, conflicting cultures, unclear reporting lines, 18 months of declining performance. Her mandate was simple: fix it. Her timeline was 12 months. Her challenge was that everyone had a different theory about what was broken. Finance blamed operations. Operations blamed sales. Sales blamed product. Product blamed the acquisitions. Each department had data supporting their position. Each was partially right and completely blind to their own contribution. Priya applied strategic mind mapping to the entire organization. Her central question was different than expected. Not what is broken. Instead, what would aligned look like? She mapped toward a future state rather than analyzing the current mess. Capture took 3 sessions with her leadership team. Each session added elements. Customer experience connected to system integration. System integration connected to technical debt from acquisitions. Technical debt connected to engineering priorities. Engineering priorities connected to unclear product strategy. Product strategy connected to conflicting visions from acquired company leaders. Conflicting visions connected to unresolved cultural tensions. Cultural tensions connected back to customer experience through employee disengagement. The map revealed what no departmental analysis could show. They had a circular problem. Every issue caused every other issue. No starting point seemed possible because every intervention required other interventions first. But the connect phase revealed something crucial. 3 elements appeared in multiple problem cycles. Leadership alignment. Single source of customer truth. Unified technical architecture. These were not problems. They were leverage points. Address these 3 in multiple cycles would break simultaneously. The compression was elegant. Everything reduced to one strategic priority. Create conditions for aligned decision-making. Every other problem was a symptom. Alignment was the cause. Her action map contained 90-day priorities. Weekly leadership alignment sessions with shared dashboards. Single customer data warehouse with one definition of key metrics. Architectural review board with authority over technical decisions. The 90-day focus felt dangerously narrow. Her board wanted comprehensive restructuring. Her team wanted departmental fixes. She held the line. At month 6, something shifted. The circular problems began resolving themselves. Not because she had addressed each one directly. Because aligned leaders with shared data and unified architecture made consistent decisions. Consistency compounded. Each good decision enabled the next. At month 12, performance metrics had reversed. Not completely, but trajectory was clear. The organization that seemed unfixably complex had found its way to clarity. Average executives attack organizational problems individually. They fix symptoms one by one. They work harder as complexity multiplies. Elite executives find leverage points. They map the full system identify where cycles intersect, and intervene where one change creates cascading improvement. They work strategically while others work frantically. Now notice something about these three scenarios. Different contexts: career, product, organization, different scales, individual, team, enterprise, different time frames, immediate, quarterly, annual, same methodology. Capture everything without filtering. Connect to reveal hidden relationships. Compress to find leverage points. Act on clarity rather than confusion. The framework does not care about your specific challenge. It works because it aligns with how your brain processes complexity. External context changes. Cognitive architecture remains constant. This is why strategic mind mapping transfers across domains. Learn it once, apply it everywhere. Career decisions, business strategy, relationship challenges, investment choices. The surface differs. The methodology persists. But methodology is only as valuable as its implementation. Knowing the framework intellectually does not produce results. Using the framework consistently does. The next chapter addresses this directly. You will learn the specific protocol for thinking 10 times faster. Not through rushing. Through systematic elimination of cognitive waste. Through practices that compound your mental efficiency daily. The promise in the title of this audiobook, Think 10 Times Faster, is not metaphor. It is measurable, and the measurement comes from something specific you can practice. The protocol is waiting, and it is simpler than you expect. Chapter 9. The 10 Times Faster Thinking Protocol. 8 minutes. That is how long elite strategic thinkers spend on decisions that take average professionals 8 hours. Not because they think faster in the neurological sense. Their neurons fire at the same speed as everyone else's. The difference is elimination. They have systematically removed the cognitive waste that turns simple clarity into endless deliberation. 10 times faster is not a marketing claim. It is a measurable outcome of specific practices. Practices you can implement starting today. In the next several minutes, you will learn exactly what creates cognitive waste and how to eliminate it. You will understand the 5 speed multipliers that elite thinkers use instinctively and that you can adopt deliberately. And you will have a daily protocol that compounds your mental efficiency over time. This is not about rushing. Rushing degrades quality. This is about precision. Doing exactly what produces insight and nothing else. Let us begin with why most thinking takes so long. The average professional spends 73% of their thinking time on activities that produce zero insight. 73%. This statistic comes from a cognitive efficiency study conducted at the University of London's Institute of Cognitive Neuroscience. Researchers tracked thought patterns during complex decision-making and categorized each mental activity by its contribution to the final decision. Nearly 3/4 of mental effort contributed nothing. What consumes this wasted time? 5 categories of cognitive waste. First, repetitive rehearsal. Running the same thoughts through your mind repeatedly without modification. You think about the problem, reach no conclusion, then think about it again identically. And again, and again. Second, premature evaluation. Judging ideas before they are fully formed. Killing possibilities in infancy because they seem impractical before you have explored their implications. Third, context switching. Jumping between different aspects of a problem without completing analysis of any single aspect. Starting to think about option A, shifting to worry about option B, bouncing to consideration of option C. Motion without progress. Fourth, perfectionism loops. Seeking certainty that does not exist. Analyzing further in hope that more analysis will eliminate risk. It never does. Fifth, invisible assumptions. Operating from beliefs you have not examined. Spending enormous effort optimizing within constraints that are not actually constraints. These 5 categories explain why intelligent people spend hours on decisions that should take minutes. They are not thinking slowly. They are thinking wastefully. Strategic mind mapping eliminates waste by design. Let me show you how. The first speed multiplier is single pass capture. When you externalize thoughts onto a mind map, you break the repetitive rehearsal cycle. A thought appears on the map. It is captured. Your brain can release it. No need to hold it in working memory. No need to cycle through it repeatedly to avoid forgetting. Research from the University of California, San Diego found that externalizing thoughts reduced repetitive mental cycling by 64%. 64% of rehearsal waste eliminated through one simple practice. But single-pass capture requires discipline. You must trust the map to hold what matters. You must resist the urge to keep thoughts circulating internally for safety. This trust develops with practice. Each time the map proves reliable, your brain releases more willingly. Average thinkers keep thoughts internal as a form of perceived security. They believe that circulating ideas mentally keeps them active and available. It does not. It consumes cognitive resources while producing nothing. Elite thinkers externalize immediately. They trust external systems to hold information. They free working memory for actual thinking rather than mental storage. The second speed multiplier is deferred judgment. The capture phase of strategic mind mapping prohibits evaluation. You externalize everything without assessing quality or relevance. This practice directly eliminates premature evaluation waste. When you judge ideas during generation, you activate critical thinking networks that suppress creative thinking networks. Neuroscience has documented this interference effect extensively. You cannot generate and evaluate simultaneously without degrading both functions. A study from the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Center measured idea generation under different conditions. Participants who deferred all judgment until after capture produced 41% more viable ideas in the same time period. Same cognitive effort, 41% more output. The only difference was when judgment occurred. Deferred judgment feels uncomfortable initially. Your brain wants to evaluate immediately. It wants to reject bad ideas before they take space in your map. Override this instinct. Capture first. Judge later. The time you save dwarfs the minor inconvenience of mapping ideas you will later discard. The third speed multiplier is visual chunking. Context switching wastes time because reloading mental context is expensive. Every time you shift from one aspect of a problem to another, your brain must rebuild the relevant mental model. This rebuilding takes time and energy. Mind maps reduce context switching cost through visual chunking. Related ideas cluster visually. When you shift attention from one branch to another, the visual proximity maintains context. You can see how the new focus relates to what you were just considering. Linear formats maximize context switching cost. Each item exists in isolation. Moving from item 7 to item 3 requires mentally reconstructing the relationships between them. Visual formats minimize context switching cost. Relationships remain visible. Moving between elements maintains systemic awareness. Research from Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute measured task switching efficiency across different information formats. Visual spatial formats showed 37% lower switching costs than linear text formats. This explains why mind map users report feeling less mentally exhausted after complex analysis. They are not working less hard. They are wasting less energy on context reconstruction. The fourth speed multiplier is compression discipline. Perfectionism loops stem from a mistaken belief. The belief that more analysis will eventually produce certainty. It will not. Complex decisions contain irreducible uncertainty. No amount of analysis eliminates it. Compression discipline breaks perfectionism loops by imposing structure. The compress phase forces you to identify 3 to 5 key factors regardless of how much more you could analyze. This constraint is not arbitrary. It reflects cognitive reality. Your brain cannot effectively act on more than 5 strategic variables. When you impose compression discipline, you convert an endless task into a bounded task. Analysis no longer continues until certainty emerges. Analysis continues until you have identified your key factors. Then it stops. Elite thinkers treat compression as non-negotiable. They accept that their compressed view will be imperfect. They act anyway, knowing that imperfect action beats perfect paralysis. Average thinkers resist compression. They believe the next round of analysis might reveal something crucial. It rarely does. What it reliably does is consume time while producing diminishing returns. The fifth speed multiplier is assumption surfacing. This is the highest leverage intervention. Invisible assumptions constrain your thinking without your awareness. You spend enormous effort optimizing within boundaries that exist only in your mind. Strategic mind mapping surfaces assumptions through visual contradiction detection. When you map a complex situation, incompatible elements become visible. Branch A assumes market growth. Branch B assumes resource constraints. If market growth occurs, resources will be available. Your map contains a hidden contradiction that reveals a hidden assumption. Once surfaced, assumptions can be questioned. Is the market growth assumption valid? Is the resource constraint real or perceived? Often, entire problem framings dissolve when underlying assumptions are examined. A study from INSEAD Business School examined strategic planning effectiveness. Teams that explicitly surfaced and tested assumptions before planning produced strategies rated 52% more likely to succeed by independent evaluators. Half the advantage of elite strategic planning comes from examining what average planners take for granted. Now here is how these 5 multipliers combine into a daily protocol. Each morning, before reactive work begins, spend 15 minutes in strategic thinking mode. Choose one challenge currently consuming mental energy. Apply the following sequence. Minutes 1 through 5. Single pass capture. Externalize everything related to the challenge onto a fresh mind map. No evaluation. No organization. Pure extraction from mind to map. Minutes 5 through 10. Visual connection. Draw relationships between elements. Look specifically for contradictions that reveal assumptions. Note surprises. Minutes 10 through 12. Compression. Identify the 3 key factors. Not 5. Not 7. 3. Force the choice. Minutes 12 through 15. Action definition. For each key factor, define one specific next step you could complete within 24 hours. 15 minutes. Daily. That is the protocol. This practice does not just process one challenge per day. It trains the 5 multipliers until they become automatic. After 30 days, you will notice yourself capturing instead of rehearsing during normal thinking. After 60 days, you will defer judgment instinctively. After 90 days, the full protocol will activate automatically whenever you face complexity. The 10 times faster promise is not about the protocol itself. It is about what the protocol develops. Mental habits that eliminate cognitive waste. Perceptual skills that find leverage points quickly. Automatic compression that creates clarity from chaos. One executive I worked with tracked her decision-making time before and after adopting this protocol. Average time to decision clarity before was 6 hours and 20 minutes. Average time after 90 days of practice was 38 minutes. Not exactly 10 times faster. Approximately 10 times faster. Your results will vary, but the direction will not. Eliminate cognitive waste and thinking accelerates. Train the multipliers and acceleration compounds. But speed without sustainability is worthless. Sprinting leads to burnout. The question is not just how to think faster, but how to maintain enhanced thinking over months and years. The final chapter addresses this directly. You will learn how to build a strategic thinking system that persists. Not a technique you try and abandon. A fundamental upgrade to how your mind operates. Systems beat motivation. And the system you are about to learn will serve you for the rest of your life. The protocol is powerful. The system is permanent. Chapter 10. Building your strategic thinking system. 21 years. That is how long Dr. Angela Duckworth spent studying what separates people who achieve lasting success from those who start strong and fade. Her research at the University of Pennsylvania examined thousands of individuals across domains. West Point cadets, National Spelling Bee champions, Fortune 500 executives, elite performers in every measurable field. Her conclusion transformed how we understand achievement. Success is not about talent. It is not about intensity. It is about systems. The people who sustain excellence build structures that make excellence automatic. They do not rely on motivation. They rely on architecture. In the next several minutes, you will learn how to build a strategic thinking system that persists. Not a technique you will try for a week and forget. A fundamental restructuring of how you engage with complexity. By the end of this chapter, you will have everything you need to think differently for the rest of your life. This is where temporary insight becomes permanent capability. Let us build your system. First, understand why most learning fails. You have consumed significant information in this audiobook. Strategic frameworks, cognitive science, practical techniques. If you are like most people, you feel energized right now. You intend to apply what you have learned. You believe things will be different. Research suggests otherwise. A study from the National Training Laboratories measured retention and application rates across different learning formats. The average person retains only 10% of what they read and 20% of what they hear. More importantly, application rates are even lower. Only 3% of learners consistently apply new techniques 6 months after learning them. 3%. This is not because 97% lack willpower. It is because information alone does not change behavior. Only systems change behavior. Here is what the 3% do differently. They convert knowledge into structure. They build external systems that trigger new behaviors automatically. They do not rely on remembering to do things differently. They create environments where doing things differently is the path of least resistance. This is what you must do with strategic mind mapping. Not remember to use it. Build a system that makes using it automatic. Let me show you exactly how. The first element of your system is environmental design. Your environment constantly shapes your behavior. The tools within reach, the spaces you occupy, the default options available. These environmental factors influence decisions far more than conscious intention. Research from Duke University found that approximately 45% of daily behaviors are habitual responses to environmental cues rather than conscious choices. Nearly half of what you do is triggered automatically by your surroundings. Use this to your advantage. Create a dedicated strategic thinking space. This does not require a separate room, a specific corner of your desk, a particular notebook that you use only for mind maps, a digital tool that opens to a blank canvas. The physical or digital space becomes a cue. Entering this space triggers strategic thinking mode. Place your mind mapping tools where you will encounter them naturally. If you use paper, keep large blank pages and colored pins visible on your workspace. If you use digital tools, pin the application to your primary toolbar. Reduce friction between intention and action to 0. Remove competing triggers. When you sit down for strategic thinking, eliminate access to email, messages, and other reactive inputs. Your environment should cue creation, not consumption. Average performers rely on willpower to override environmental defaults. They try to think strategically in environments designed for reactive work. They fail repeatedly and blame themselves. Elite performers redesign environments to make desired behaviors automatic. They externalize willpower into structure. They succeed consistently because their environment supports success. The second element of your system is temporal anchoring. New behaviors must attach to existing routines. Without a specific time trigger, strategic thinking competes with everything else demanding your attention. It loses. The 15-minute morning protocol from the previous chapter is not just a technique. It is an anchor. By connecting strategic thinking to a fixed daily moment, you remove the decision of when to do it. The anchor triggers the behavior automatically. But morning is not the only option. The key is consistency and protection. Some professionals anchor strategic thinking to their commute. Others anchor it to the transition between major work blocks. Others anchor it to the end of their workday as a preparation for tomorrow. Choose your anchor based on 2 criteria. First, it must be a moment that occurs reliably every day. Sporadic anchors produce sporadic practice. Second, it must be a moment you can protect from interruption. Strategic thinking requires focused attention. Fragmented attention produces fragmented results. Research from the British Journal of Health Psychology found that implementation intentions, specific plans linking behaviors to times and contexts, increased follow-through by 300% compared to motivation alone. 300%. Do not rely on motivation to practice strategic thinking. Create implementation intentions. I will do my 15-minute strategic thinking session immediately after my morning coffee. I will apply the four-step framework whenever I face a decision involving more than three options. Specific triggers. Specific responses. The third element of your system is progressive complexity. Skill development requires appropriate challenge. Too easy, and you do not grow. Too difficult, and you become frustrated and quit. Begin with simple applications. Single decisions. Clearly bounded challenges. Problems where the strategic mind mapping framework produces obvious value quickly. As competence grows, increase complexity. Multi-stakeholder situations. Longer time horizons. More ambiguous problem definitions. Each increase in complexity builds capability for the next level. A study from Florida State University's Expert Performance Research Program found that deliberate practice at the edge of current ability produced skill gains 6 times faster than practice within the comfort zone. 6 times faster. Map your development trajectory. Week 1 through 4, apply strategic mind mapping to personal decisions only. Week 5 through 8, extend to professional decisions affecting only yourself. Week 9 through 12, apply to decisions affecting your team. Week 13 onward, apply to organizational and strategic challenges. This progression is not arbitrary. Each stage builds pattern recognition and confidence for the next. Rushing to complex applications before foundational skill develops produces frustration, not growth. The fourth element of your system is reflection loops. Improvement requires feedback. Without reflection, you repeat mistakes indefinitely. With reflection, each application teaches lessons that improve the next. Build a simple reflection practice into your system. After each significant mind mapping session, spend 3 minutes answering 3 questions. What pattern did I notice that I would have missed with linear thinking? What did I capture that surprised me? What would I do differently next time? These questions direct attention to learning. They transform experience into expertise. A study from Harvard Business School found that employees who spent 15 minutes daily reflecting on lessons learned performed 23% better than control groups after 10 days. Reflection is not optional for excellence. It is essential. Keep a brief log of your reflections. Over time, this log reveals your growth trajectory. It shows patterns in your pattern recognition. It provides evidence of development that sustains motivation through difficult periods. Average learners practice without reflection. They accumulate repetitions without extracting lessons. They plateau quickly and wonder why they stop improving. Elite learners reflect systematically. They mine each experience for insight. They compound learning over time and achieve levels of performance that seem unreachable to those who merely practice. The fifth element of your system is social reinforcement. Behaviors embedded in social context persist longer than isolated individual practices. When others expect you to think strategically, when you have committed publicly to this approach, when your identity becomes connected to systematic thinking, abandonment becomes psychologically costly. Share your strategic thinking practice with at least one other person. This could be a colleague, a mentor, a friend, or a professional community. Tell them what you are doing. Show them your maps periodically. Discuss insights and challenges. Research from the American Society of Training and Development found that people who committed to another person achieved their goals at a 95% success rate compared to 25% for those who merely decided internally. Social commitment nearly quadruples success probability. But social reinforcement goes beyond accountability. When you explain your strategic thinking to others, you deepen your own understanding. Teaching is the highest form of learning. When you discuss your maps, you notice patterns you missed. When you defend your compressions, you stress test your reasoning. Build relationships around strategic thinking. Seek out others who value systematic approaches to complexity. Create or join communities where mind mapping and visual thinking are normal, expected, and celebrated. Your social environment shapes your cognitive environment. Surround yourself with strategic thinkers, and strategic thinking becomes your default. Now let me integrate everything into your complete system. Your strategic thinking system has 5 components working together. Environment, a dedicated space with visible tools that cue strategic thinking automatically. Anchor, a specific daily moment protected from interruption where the 15-minute protocol occurs. Progression, a development trajectory that increases complexity appropriately as skill grows. Reflection, a three-question practice after each session that extracts learning and tracks growth. Social, at least one relationship where you share, discuss, and commit to your practice. These 5 components create a self-reinforcing structure. Environment triggers behavior. Anchors ensure consistency. Progression maintains challenge. Reflection accelerates improvement. Social context sustains commitment. Remove any component and the system weakens. Include all 5 and the system becomes self-sustaining. This is what separates the 3% who transform from the 97% who return to old patterns. Not motivation, not willpower, system architecture. Now here is what happens when you run this system consistently. In the first 30 days, strategic mind mapping feels like a technique you are practicing. It requires conscious effort. You must remind yourself to capture before judging, to connect before compressing, to compress before acting. In days 30 through 60, the technique begins feeling more natural. You notice yourself reaching for mind maps automatically when complexity appears. The framework starts running in the background of your thinking. In days 60 through 90, transformation becomes visible. Others comment that you seem clearer, more decisive, more strategic. You realize that you are seeing patterns you never noticed before. Complexity that once overwhelmed you now feels manageable. Beyond 90 days, strategic thinking becomes identity. You do not use mind maps. You are someone who thinks visually and strategically. The system has rewired your default approach to complexity. This progression is not guaranteed by time alone. It requires consistent practice within your system. But the progression is reliable for those who build and maintain the architecture. You now have everything you need. The neuroscience of why visual thinking works. The framework that structures strategic mind mapping. The techniques for decision compression and pattern recognition. The protocol for accelerating your thinking. The system for making transformation permanent. This is not information to consider. This is a capability to build. The executives, entrepreneurs, and professionals who master strategic mind mapping do not succeed because they learned something others do not know. This information is available to anyone. They succeed because they built systems that converted knowledge into practice, and they maintained those systems until practice became identity. You can do the same, not through motivation, which fades, through architecture, which persists. Clarity before speed. Systems over motivation. These phrases have appeared throughout this audiobook. They are not slogans. They are principles that distinguish elite cognitive performance from average effort. Clarity before speed means never rushing to action before you understand the structure of what you face. It means investing in visual externalization even when time pressure screams to skip it. It means trusting that the time spent creating clarity saves multiples in execution. Systems over motivation means never relying on willpower to maintain practices that matter. It means building external structures that make desired behaviors automatic. It means accepting that human motivation is unreliable and engineering around that limitation. These principles are now yours. The question is what you will do with them. Most people who finish this audiobook will feel inspired. They will intend to apply what they learned. They will return to their lives, encounter the first demanding day, and default to old patterns. They will remember this content occasionally, wish they had implemented it, and gradually forget. A small percentage will do something different. They will pause before returning to their lives. They will build their system, environment, anchor, progression, reflection, social. They will begin the 15-minute protocol tomorrow, not someday. They will treat this not as information consumed, but as capability constructed. The difference between these groups is not intelligence, talent, or circumstances. It is decision. The decision to build rather than merely learn. You have spent approximately 2 hours with this audiobook. In that time, you have received a complete system for strategic thinking. A system grounded in neuroscience. A system proven across elite performers. A system that can change how you navigate complexity for the rest of your life. The system does not activate itself. You must build it. Starting now. Starting with the first component. Starting with the decision that this will be different. Strategic thinking is not a gift some people have and others lack. It is a capability that can be developed. You now know exactly how to develop it. The complexity of your world is not decreasing. The decisions you face are not getting simpler. The competitive environment is not becoming more forgiving. But you are now equipped differently than you were 2 hours ago. You understand what most never learn. You have a framework most never acquire. You have a system most never build. What you do with that equipment is your choice. Choose wisely, then act. Your strategic thinking system is waiting to be built. Build it. 30 days. That is all that stands between who you are now and who you could become. Not 30 months. Not 30 years. 30 days of deliberate practice that rewire how you process complexity forever. Research from University College London found that new cognitive habits require an average of 66 days to become fully automatic. But the critical finding most people miss is this: the steepest gains occur in the first 30 days. After 1 month of consistent practice, the neural pathways are established. Everything afterward is reinforcement. You have the framework. Now here is your implementation blueprint. Week 1, Foundation. Day 1, build your environment. Create your strategic thinking space. Place your tools where you will see them daily. Do not create a mind map yet. Just build the container. Day 2, set your anchor. Choose the exact moment your daily 15-minute protocol will occur. Put it in your calendar as non-negotiable. Days 3 through 7, practice on simple questions. What are my priorities this week? What is causing me stress? What opportunity am I ignoring? 1 question per day, 15 minutes each. Capture, connect, compress, act. Week 2, Applicat. Ion. Identify 3 real decisions you are currently facing. Apply full strategic mind mapping to 1 decision each day on days 8 through 10. Days 11 through 14. Review your maps and document what surprised you. This is where the framework stops being practice and becomes power. Week 3, Acceleration. Reduce session time to 12 minutes while maintaining quality. The constraint forces efficiency. Your brain will eliminate waste automatically. Practice the 4 pattern recognition questions on every map. What appears multiple times? What is absent? What contradicts? What connects most? Day 21, assess your transformation. Map this question: how has my thinking changed? Week 4, integration. Apply strategic mind mapping to a significant challenge. Something that genuinely matters. Career, business, relationship, finance. Use everything you have learned. Share your practice with at least 1 other person. Teaching consolidates learning. Social commitment sustains practice. Design your ongoing system. What works best for you? Document it. This becomes your permanent architecture. The emergent Psi protocol. When you have only 5 minutes. Minute 1. Write the decision as a specific question. Minute 2. Radiate 3 important considerations. Minute 3. Connect the 2 elements that most affect each other. Minute 4. Circle the single factor that matters most. Minute 5. Write 1 action for the next 24 hours. 5 minutes of structured visual thinking beats 5 hours of mental cycling. One thing rule. If you remember nothing else from this audiobook, remember this. Get it out of your head. Complexity that stays internal remains invisible. Complexity that becomes external becomes manageable. Your visual cortex cannot find patterns and thoughts trapped behind your eyes. When confusion arises, externalize. When decisions loom, map before you decide. When overwhelm threatens, make it visible. This single habit changes everything. Your transformation begins now. You have reached the end of this audiobook, but you have reached a beginning. The 30-day blueprint is not a suggestion. It is an invitation to become someone who thinks differently than you have ever thought before. Someone who sees patterns others miss. Someone who navigates complexity with clarity and confidence. The information here took years to compile. The framework has been tested across thousands of applications. Everything works, but none of it matters if you do not begin. Beginning does not require confidence. It requires movement. Clarity is not something you wait for. It is something that emerges once you act. Day 1 is tomorrow, or day 1 is never. If you begin, 30 days from now, you will think faster, see clearer, and decide better than you do today. This is not motivation. This is mechanism. The neural pathways will form. The patterns will become visible. The clarity you have been searching for will become your default state. This is not hope. This is how the brain works when you work with it. If you do not begin, 30 days from now, nothing will have changed. The same 30 days will pass regardless of what you choose. The only question is who you will be when they are over. You have the framework. You have the techniques. You have the blueprint. Now build your system. Start tomorrow. Transform everything. The next 30 days are waiting. Make them count.